My name is Summer Bingham Musick. I am an assistant professor of religion here at the University of Pikeville. I grew up in Elkhorn City, about 45 minutes from Pikeville. I went to college here when it was still Pikeville College. I graduated with a bachelor's in comparative religion and psychology. Then I moved away for graduate school. I went to the University of Bristol in the United Kingdom. And then I moved back home after I traveled a bit and started teaching here. I got married. I married Chaplain Rob Musick, and we have 3 kids. I have 3 stepkids, ages 6, 8, and 11, almost 6, 9, and 12. And I have a dog, Siberian Husky, named Suna. So if any students come into my office, there's lint rollers laying everywhere because we're all constantly covered in dog hair.
As a kid, what is it that you wanted to do?
I wanted to be a lot of things when I was a kid. Trying to think of where to start with my stack. I wanted to be a veterinarian. Very specifically, I wanted to work with pandas, because what little girl doesn't want to work with cuddly pandas all day? I wanted to be a forensic psychologist and investigator. At one point, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to be an FBI agent, and then I just wanted to be a counselor, psychologist. Also wanted to be an artist. The one thing that I've consistently wanted to do since I was a kid and well into adulthood is write. I always wanted to publish a book. So a lot of things.
When we think about dreams, we come with all kinds of dreams. But for you, do you have a dream job?
I love my job now. I never thought I would be doing my job, but I love it. So I think when I first started college, I met some really formative people like Dr. James Browning, Dr. John Howie, and they helped me realize, along with one teacher that I had in high school, Steve Taylor, they helped me realize just how important education is, not just on an academic level, but the type of formative relationships that you can form with your teachers and your mentors. And I realized that they were in a position to literally save my life, because I struggled a lot in college, and from that point I knew that I had this passion for religion. Once I started college, I had a Dr. Browning's Old Testament class, and I realized that all the questions that I had asked as a child that I'd been told not to ask, people had been asking them for centuries. And so I got some affirmation there, and I just kind of fell in love with it. So for a long time, I just, for the last decade, I've just been trying to teach. And so I really love my job. Now, when I think of a dream job, I see my role expanding so that my impact is not just on students that walk in my office, but a specific population of students that struggle with, or specific population of people that struggle with sexual violence and recovering and healing from that. So my dream job would be somehow utilizing the tools that different religious traditions teach to help people heal from sexual violence.
Did anything in life did anything in life happen that spurred you on to this call, this passion, this experience that you have with teaching and religion and higher ed?
Yeah, for higher ed in particular, like I said, there were a few formative people, James Browning and John Howie and Steve Taylor, kind of the 3 at the top of the list, and Carol Grizzard Browning. So when I met them, they kind of opened my eyes to see the world in a completely different way. My call to work with victims of sexual violence comes from the deep wounding of my own that occurred when I was younger, and then just encountering people through this job who've been through some pretty horrible things. So when I bring those two things into dialogue, there's a few people that have really shaped that call.
I know it's hard to take a whole life and try to summarize in a sentence, but when you think about your own life, and you say, here's what I'm called to, right? Or here's my purpose. Right now, in this moment, if you were to do that in a sentence, Summer Bingham Music, your call is?
To help people heal from sexual violence.
Would you say then your current job helps you or aligns with that call?
Yeah, I think if I can give you like a whole kind of, try to summarize my life in a short interview here. When I moved away, so I grew up here and, had some rough patches in childhood. I'll let you fill in the blanks there. And I, came to college and sort of faced some of those things. And then when I moved away, I moved to England and I met a woman named Nora Devara, who was an Irish shaman. And we studied together for a little while in Bristol. And I remember having a conversation with her in Waterstones. It's a bookstore in England. We were in Waterstones one night in the historic district of Bristol. And we were supposed to be looking at books, but we ended up standing in the middle of this bookstore for like 3 hours talking about life call. And here I was, just 20-something years old, trying to figure that out. And I knew that religion was where it was at for me. I knew that was the space that provided the answers that I was seeking. Questions about, why do bad things happen, and where is God in the midst of tragedy, and what do I even believe about God, and all these religious traditions are teaching me that I'm made in the image of God in one form or another, but that just didn't make any sense to me after some of the things I've been through. So I was trying to figure out the answers to those questions and to the great problem of suffering, and I knew that I had this very strong pull to study religion and theology and spirituality. But I also knew that I had a passion for psychology, and that psychology is the discipline that is trying to ask and answer questions about, what's happening inside the brain when you're traumatized, and how do relationships exist when you're traumatized, and so all these things, right? So I have these two disciplines, religion and psychology. And when I talked to Nora in the middle of Waterstones, I talked to her extensively about how I knew that at some point in my life, my love for religion and psychology were going to converge. I just had no clue at that point what that was going to look like. And now I'm, almost a decade away from that conversation, and that is just now starting to form in front of me. And it happened because of a question that my husband asked me one day in the chapel here at UPIC. He asked me, if you could do anything and you weren't afraid to fail, what would it be? And I realized that if I could do anything, it would be to open some type of center for women to heal using all these spiritual practices that have saved me and shaped me in the last 20 years.
When you think about influence, you mentioned people who've been influential to you already. Can you name one person who's been probably most influential on helping you understand this passion of yours? You mentioned educators, you mentioned, your husband, but let's think about particularly like maybe an academic mentor. Who's been most influential to you?
Probably James Browning. James is my extra dad. I joke with him about that all the time. So he's been like the stabilizing, like, mentor figure in my life that has been there for all of the tough questions and all of the meltdowns. And I can remember being a student, an undergrad student in his office, and I would just, go grab lunch and sit and eat in his office and not say anything. It was just like kind of comforting to be with James because he's James. He's just great to be around. So he's been probably the most influential person in my life.
So if a person was listening to this and they said, wow, you have a job that I want your life, What did you do to position yourself for this job?
A lot of hard work, and a lot of good people have helped me get to where I'm at. So, I graduated high school, and I missed 70-some days my senior year. I would skip class, and I would show up for like 6th and 7th period, which were my 2 favorite classes of the day. It was art and history with Willa Mae and Steve Taylor. Those were the only 2 classes I would show up for. And then if I got there earlier, I would just hang out in the library all day. But I skipped everything. I hated high school. And when I got to college, I just saw education as, on the one hand, it was kind of my way out, but on the other hand, I just fell in love with it. I was not a good student in high school, but when I got to college, I just, like, I couldn't stop learning. Like, I was so excited to be around people that were nerdy and just, you know, could easily get lost in, you know, in thinking about all these big questions that I had been circulating in my head for years. So when I got to college, I studied my butt off, but not because it was a chore, but because I loved it, and I didn't realize I could love something so much. So college for me was hanging out in my professor's offices and, you know, staying in the library with my friends until it closed, not to play games on the computer, but still a study room and talk about Brahman and Atman and Hinduism and the concept that all life is suffering in Buddhism and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like, and how that applied to my life, and interpreting our dreams for Howie's Dreams class. Like, we stayed in the library until it closed to talk about those things, and then when the library closed, we'd go to our car in the parking garage and stay there until 3 or 4 a.m. and talk about it there. So I guess I became a bit obsessed with it. So that was undergrad. That was 4 years of undergrad. And then I took a little bit of a break because I was having a bit of an existential crisis. Do I choose psychology or religion? I worked as a case manager for a year, about a year and a half. And that was a grounding experience to realize that for the last 4 years I'd been sort of up in my head, which is where I naturally tend to stay. And working as a case manager, I was with real people and real families who were struggling every day. So that provided some, I didn't realize I needed it at the time, but it provided some much needed grounding for me to kind of think about, well, I have all these really heady ideas, but what does that really matter if it's not actually helping people? So I decided religion, and I took a risk, and even though everyone told me, what the heck are you ever going to do with a religion degree? So I moved. I moved to England with the help of some very good people, mainly the ladies that lived at Mount Tabor Benedictine community. I lived at that monastery for 6 months, and my friend Laurie Sandblom, she was a nun at the time at Mount Tabor. She moved to England with me for about 2 weeks and helped me get settled, which was good because I was terrified and there's no way I could have done it on my own. So I did that. So a lot of hard work in undergrad, and then taking risks. You know, I took a big risk financially, and a big risk just in terms of like leaving Appalachia. You know, I'd never really been out of Pikeville before, and I went from Pikeville to England and made a whole new family there, a whole new international family that I'm still in touch with today. And I worked my butt off when I was in England, but not because it was a chore, but just because it was amazing. I just couldn't go anywhere without learning something and asking the big questions. And then I moved back home and did it all again. So I guess just commitment and dedication and just passion for learning.
As a professor, you have conversations with students frequently. Come in, they might want their grades changed or whatever.
That never happens.
But oftentimes students come in very confused. You know, they feel these pressures from the outside, and and they have no idea. Just feel no idea. So when a student comes in and says they just have no idea about what they're called to do or what they should do with their life, what advice do you have for them?
You don't have to have it all figured out right now. I think that's a huge weight that we put on people, that they somehow have to figure out their entire life at the age of 19. No, you don't have to figure it out all out right now. I would say just do what makes you happy. John Howie taught me something really important. He said, whatever you love, do that. But you can't do it half-heartedly. You have to give everything you've got to it, right? And I think that's really good guidance for students. You don't have to have it all figured out, but also don't be afraid to take a risk. If something seems impossible, but you are absolutely in love with it, then do it anyway, and you'll figure it out along the way. And read through the catalogs, read the classes that sound absolutely fascinating, and go study that. The time that you spend in undergrad will be the best 4 or 5 years of your life. So I would say take absolute full advantage of that and use this time to really ask those big questions. And for me, passion came from looking at my own wounds, and instead of asking the question, what do I want to be when I grow up, asking the question, what do I want to change about the world?